So today we are going to be looking at invoicing and bank deposits within ExpensePlus. We're going to start by looking at the invoicing module, which is the module that you'll see over here. So we're going to click on the invoicing module first. We're going to look at how to get started with this module, how to get it set up, ready for your church or charity if you haven't already done so. We're going to look at the different ways that you can create invoices within this module and how you can email customers. We're also going to look at creating credit notes. We're going to look at applying credit notes to invoices. We're going to look at writing off invoices as bad debt, and we're also going to look at how you can reconcile invoice payments that come in from customers. And then finally, within the invoicing module, we're going to look at some of the different screens and reports in this module as well. I'm going to keep checking my notes as we go through, so just to make sure that I don't miss anything, but hopefully I will cover most of the questions that you have as we go through. Now, it's worth saying that if you are using ExpensePlus and you create accounts on an accruals basis, that ExpensePlus will automatically accrue for invoice income for you. And what that means is when you create an invoice, when you set the invoice date, the income will appear in your financial reports based on the date of the invoice that you send to the customer, not on the date that they pay you, which obviously could be a few weeks or a few months later. So ExpensePlus automatically creates those accruals in your accounts for you if you create accounts on an accruals basis. If you don't do that and you create accounts on a receipts and payments basis, which is kind of the simplified form of accounting, then ExpensePlus will also account for your transactions correctly. And finally, just to let you know, that this module will include some of the updates that we added to this module in the summer of 2025. And so we'll cover lots of the new features that appear in this module as well as we go through. So when you first come to this module, you'll need to go to the settings option, which is in the top right-hand corner of the screen. We're going to click on that, and we're going to work our way through this, looking at invoice profiles, invoice items, and invoice templates. We're going to start with invoice profiles then. So invoice profiles are how you customize what invoices look like, but also in terms of kind of adding a logo, adding your color theme, but also how you customize them in terms of the bank account that you want customers to pay into, the payment terms that you might set. And so when you come into this screen, you'll need to create at least one invoice profile. Now, for many organizations, they just create one invoice profile, but you do have the option to create multiple invoice profiles, as you can see this example organization has done. So let's have a look at an invoice profile inside here. You get to give the invoice profile a profile name. You can add your own logo. You can set your own color theme. You can add your organization's details. You can connect an invoice profile to Stripe. And if you do this, this just means that as well as customers paying you by bank transfer or by check, if you let them do that, they'll also be able to pay via card payment, which makes it really quick and easy for them to pay invoices. They'll show us paid immediately inside ExpensePlus. If you want to check out that option, feel free to check out our help guide article about it, but you can connect a profile to Stripe and connect it to a Stripe account to allow customers to pay you via card payment. You can also add bank details in here and specify which bank account customers should pay you into. You've got payment terms, which you can set your default. You can override this default when creating invoices. You can set a CC address. This is someone inside your organization that you want to be emailed every time you send out an email to a customer. If you would like that, then you can set that as well. You set a reply to address where you want customers to reply to you, and then you can set some footer content as well inside here. Now, when you create invoices, the income gets allocated to one or more funds and categories. If you would like to set a default fund and category, you can absolutely do so here. Don't worry if you want to sometimes invoice to another fund or category, because you can overwrite this per invoice. This is just the default if you choose to set this. And so this determines, as mentioned, what your invoices are going to look like and the payment details and payment terms that appear inside the invoices that you create. So this is invoice profiles, and you'll need to do this as you get started with the invoicing module. Next, we're going to move on to invoice items. I'm just going to check my notes to check that I've not missed anything. Yep. So when you invoice items, then what are these? Invoice items are the different services, resources, or products that you're going to be invoicing your customers for. So if we take a look at this, we can see some examples of this. In this example, we have got a room that we're hiring out at £20 an hour. And so that is an invoice item, and we can set a unit price for that. And then when we're creating invoices, we can decide how many hours of use of that resource that particular customer is using. We've got a different example down here of refreshments. this is a unit price per head. And so when we're invoicing again, we can set the number of heads, essentially number of people that we're invoicing for. And so that will automatically determine what amount is owed by the customer based on the unit price. Or you might just have a fixed unit price for using something. So earn hire is just £50 if you want to hire our earn. So again, you can set the unit pricing for your different invoice items as you would like. But typically the different rooms that you hire out are each going to be an invoice item. If you're a church and you hire and you invoice people for weddings and funerals, the different kind of item details within those invoices are going to be an invoice item. An example for this organization, they also have accommodation that they hire out as well. So again, each of the different kind of rooms that they hire out based on how much they're going to charge, again, these are set up as invoice items in here as well. Now we're looking at saved invoice items. Saved invoice items are ones that have been set up that are going to be used for kind of many different invoices. When you create an invoice, you can also create one-off invoice items. So if there's something that's not one of your saved invoice items, but you want to add it, maybe you've got an additional charge you just want to charge a customer for extra on their invoice, then you can create one-off invoice items as well. Now, in terms of your invoice items, these are our saved ones. So whenever we create an invoice, these are the ones that are going to appear for us to select. If we're like, actually, we don't really want this one anymore and we're not going to use it, then you can click the cross to the right of it. It won't delete the item. It will just mean it's not a saved invoice item in your inventory. And so when you create an invoice, it won't be there to be viewed. You can delete an invoice item only if the invoice item has never been used. If it has been used, then you can just unsave it if you would like. Now, if you accidentally unsave an invoice item and you want to kind of turn it back into a saved invoice item, if you click this view in all items at the top here, then you can just click the tick button to the right and that will turn it back into a saved invoice item that will appear on your list. Now, in terms of editing invoice items, just like elsewhere in ExpensePlus, if you want to edit, you simply click to edit. So we're going to click on Earn Hire and we can just edit this if we would like to. Now, the reason we can edit this invoice item is because it's never been used before, which is also the reason that we can delete it. Once an invoice item has been used for one or more invoices, it's not possible just to go and change the name or change the amount because, of course, you would end up affecting the invoices that have already been created. So if we come in here and we look at our Beckett room as an invoice item, when we come in here, we'll notice that the name is not editable, nor is the unit price. But for example, if we're now going to charge £25 for this room hire, for example, we can click this link at the top of the page here, and this will allow us to replace this invoice item with a new one, essentially, at a different unit price or with a different name. So it is possible to replace invoice items that you wish to do so. Finally, before we leave invoice items, I'm just going to mention about applying a tag inside invoice items. So you can apply a tag inside an invoice item. What is the idea of tagging invoice items? Well, there's a number of reports within ExpensePlus that you can use and to kind of like view how invoice items are used. And those reports, which I'll come on to, are particularly useful if you have invoice item tags. So let me show you this. So here we have created tags for invoice items that relate to accommodation, ones that relate to room hire, ones that relate to weddings, ones that relate to our youth group. And the different invoice items that we've tagged with those different tags. What it's going to mean is when we look at a report for this organization, rather than kind of view all invoice items, we'll be able to segregate that report just to look at accommodation invoice items or just to look at room hire. And we'll see that later in this morning's session. Okay, I think I'm done with talking about saved invoice items. So I'm just going to go back into invoicing, back to settings, and I'm just going to mention about templates then. So invoice templates are one of the ways that you can create invoices. So we're going to look at this in a moment. You can create invoices from scratch. You can create invoices by copying other invoices. You can also create invoices from a template. And this is particularly useful in this example. We're going to talk about, we've got a wedding template, which means if someone today books a wedding at this example church, then we can basically, rather than create an invoice from scratch, we can take our wedding template and then just customize it. So essentially, when we're creating an invoice, which I'll show you in a little bit for a wedding, it will automatically include all the items that are typically included. And of course, we can customize the quantities that we're going to charge for that particular customer's needs. But you can create a template, which just basically makes it quicker to create invoices. And then finally down here, we've got other settings. This allows us, if we would like to turn off invoice quantities. Now, it's worth noting you can only turn off invoice quantities if you've never used invoice quantities so far. If you do turn invoice quantities, then what this is going to mean is that each item has a unit price, and that simply will be the price, rather than what ExpensePlus would typically do, which is to take the unit price times the quantity, i.e. the 3 hours of that room hire that's used to calculate the overall price. Actually, if you turn off invoice quantities, your invoices are just going to look slightly simpler. And so that is an option if you would like. We'd recommend, though, that you leave it to how it is set when you come into this module. Just going to check my notes to see if there's anything I've missed. No, that's okay. So we're now going to move on to talking about customers inside the invoicing module. So we've talked about how we set up our invoicing module. Obviously, in order to send invoices to customers, we need to add customers. And if we come to manage customers, we'll see that there is an option at the top of here to import our customer data. And so if you're just getting started with ExpensePlus, rather than adding customers line by line, which you can do using this add new option here, instead you can click this import. You can download a template that we provide, and then you can just upload your customer data in a single click. So do check this out if you are getting started with ExpensePlus. Now, we're going to click on invoice to a customer to edit. Obviously, the create customer looks exactly the same. So you give your customer a name. You can include billing address if you would like to. You need to, if you would like to, you can also include a primary contact name and primary contact email. You can add a phone number if you would like to. You can also add additional contacts as well. This is a new feature, so you can choose some extra people that you'd like to copy into any invoice emails sent to this customer. And you can also add any notes that you'd like about the customer, which are obviously private notes that the customer won't see, but it will just help you if you are wanting to kind of track or view customer data inside here. So this is our customers. We want to import them, we want to add them. These are the people that we are going to be invoicing. Now, in a similar way that you can tag invoice items, you can also tag customers. And again, you're going to see how this is really useful, particularly if you're going to do bulk creation of invoices. So if we click apply tag in here, we can see in this example organization, we've created 2 tags. You create tags, by the way, just by clicking this manage customer tags option at the top here. So we've got our 2 tags. We've got accommodation rental and youth group. And the reason actually we've created these tags will become very apparent in a moment, because we are going to bulk create invoices both for the people that that we have to invoice each month for rental, and the people that we invoice each term for youth group fees. And you'll see how that's really useful by tagging these customers. Customers can be part of more than one kind of tag, but it just allows us to tag the customers, and then within the invoicing module, within the reports, as well as when creating invoices, we can then filter by these tags as well. Okay, so I think that is everything I needed to mention on manage customers, which means now we're going to talk about creating customer invoices. So how do you create invoices within the invoicing module? You simply click the create invoice option, and you're given 3 options, and I'm going to talk you through these different options now. So we've got create new. This is essentially please create from scratch. We're going to select the customer in here. We're going to select the profile. We're going to pretend that we are choosing room hire as our profile. If you only have one profile, which most organizations do, you won't need to do that. And so we're going to come in here and we're going to go room hire for September into this box here. And we are going to build this customer's invoice. So we are going to pretend that they've used our Beckett room at £20 an hour. They've used that for 3 hours in the month of September. And we are going to pretend that they have used the Grove room and they've used that for 5 hours in the month of September. So you can add rows to what the customer is going to see on their invoice by either duplicating the prior row using this duplicate button or the add row button at the bottom here. If the invoice item isn't in the list, so as we're starting to search in here, if we go Grove in here, obviously it produces Grove. If we want to add something else, so we want to add another room in here, so I know Sunshine room, which doesn't happen to be an invoice item, so we can start typing in here. It's not in here. Sunshine room, maybe it's a new room that we're starting to hire out. I can always click add and then add a new invoice item if I would like to there. But for this example, we're just going to pretend that these are the rooms that this customer is hiring. If we want to add a discount to this invoice, we can either add a percentage discount or an amount discount. We can include notes to the customer. And this is particularly useful because let's pretend this customer needs to see a breakdown of of these items that we're invoicing them for. So we can come in here and we can go 09. We can say on the 2nd of September, you hired the Beckett room and you hired this 9 till 12 a.m. 9 a.m. till 12, sorry. So we can just add that in here, and we can tell them that also actually on the 9th of the 09, 2025, they hired the Grove room, and they hired that between 1 and 6 p.m. So we can add additional notes that we might want to for the customer to see inside here. And that's how you kind of break down, and it will appear on the invoice, any kind of breakdown, extra information that you need the customers to see, rather than trying to add that detail into each of the line items. The line items are the resources they're using, which are kind of used across all the invoices. So anyone that uses the Beckett room is going to end up using that line item of Beckett room, whereas the notes in terms of kind of extra detail about what they need to know goes in this notes to customer. You've got the option of including a private note. If you do that, the customer's not going to see it. You also got the option to override the due date. And this is typically used where, for example, someone hires your building maybe at the very last minute, maybe whilst you'd normally give customers 14 days to pay. Maybe for this customer, we want to set it manually because we want to give them less time to pay, because we want them to pay before the actual event happens. And then again, in terms of income allocation, if you set up your profile with a default, it would default to whatever you've told it, but you can override this. You can split invoice income against multiple funds and categories if you would like to as well. So we're going to click create invoice. That's created our invoice. It's showing us that it's Bill Jenkins. It's showing us who the primary contact is. It's showing us any carbon copy email addresses to include. If we want to include a note to the customer, we can include it here. We can preview the invoice before sending. We can download it if we choose to, and we can send it to the customer using this send email button. So it's really easy once you've created an invoice to send it to the customer. If we want to have a look at it, we can just click on this preview option here, and this shows us what the invoice is going to look like inside here. Okay, so that is creating an invoice from scratch. Now let's look at what happens if we look at the other options in here. So create invoice, this time we're going to create from a template. And this time we are going to pretend that it's a wedding. In fact, it's the same customer. Bill's now getting married. We're going to send him a wedding invoice. And so this is how you get to see how templates can really help you with creating invoices. We're going to click submit. ExpensePlus has created the invoice in one for us. It knows what a wedding invoice usually includes. It's got all of these details in here, and we can go ahead and edit it before then emailing it to the customer. So in this example, we are going to pretend that rather than 50 guests at £3 a head, we're going to pretend that this guy's got 80. And so we're going to include that in here. We're going to pretend that he doesn't want any flowers for his wedding. So we're going to get rid of that, or we could have zeroed it out. And then we can simply click update. Once done, we can do the same things as before and send this email to the customer, or we can preview it or download it if we would like to. So that's creating from a template. As you can see, it's a little bit quicker and particularly useful for where you're going to invoice multiple items, and actually you kind of know what it's going to involve. So that was create from a template. I'm going to show you a second version of create from a template now. This is where you want to bulk create. So that was simply the guy that I wanted to invoice for a wedding, and I've got a template for that. What about all of the parents of my youth group where I want to send them their termly fees invoice? I really don't want to sit there having to create from template for my 10 or 20 or 50 different customers. And so instead I can click here where it says to bulk create, click here. And this then allows me, and this is where the customer tag filter comes in really useful, because I can say, look, I only want the customers with the tag of youth group. And it immediately produces me all of the customers, the tag of youth group. I can click there and say, yep, I want all of them. Or if I don't want to send one to this guy for this particular term, and then I can click confirm. What it's going to do is it's going to let me create a youth group invoice. And so I've set up again a template for what this should look like. I'm going to set the dates. I'm going to set the date actually as tomorrow in here. These are all the customers that I'm going to invoice, and I can click confirm, and it's created all of those invoices for me. I can go and check them if I want, and then if they did have email addresses, I would be able to send them to the different customers that relates to. So that is two versions of the create from template, and hopefully gives you a flavor to understand how create from template can be quite useful. Now we're going to look at copy existing invoice. This is the third option that you have. And so we're going to come in here and we're going to click confirm. Now, when you're copying invoices, there's different ways you might want to filter it. In this particular case, I'm going to take my August invoices to create one for September. So here I've got my August invoices in here. And so, for example, I've got Leeds University that are using that I invoiced in August. I want to create them a similar one for September. So I can just go ahead and I can click that, click confirm. I can select the date that I want to invoice them in September. So maybe the 1st of September. click confirm. And what it's done is it's taken the old invoice to create the new invoice. Now here, maybe I want to change this. Maybe actually they use the main hall for 3 days, and so I want to increase that. That's absolutely fine. I can do that, and then I can click update in here. So that is create by copying a previous invoice. Let me show you the same thing again, but this time I'm going to show you a use case for where you might want to do this on bulk. So I mentioned that this example organization had accommodation that they rented out. So I'm going to go to August again. I'm now going to use the customer tag filter just to filter for any customers with the accommodation rental. And we can see, look, in August, we invoiced these 4 people that are kind of, we're invoicing for rent. We can see that we've invoiced them different amounts. And so we wouldn't probably want to use the copy from template, because if we do from template, it's going to be the same kind of thing, like weddings. Whereas here, we actually just want to create the same invoices again. Well, this copy invoice is a great way to do it. I can click and say, yes, I want to create all of these again. I can click confirm. I can select an invoice date. So I'm going to say, yep, I want to invoice them all on the 1st of September. I can click confirm. And what that's done is it's created the invoices by essentially copying what was done the previous month into the new month, and I got to specify date. So hopefully that makes sense. There's lots of different ways to create invoices. The quickest way and the best way for you is going to depend on your scenario, but hopefully that gives you a flavor of how you can create invoices. I'm just going to have a quick look at my notes in case there's anything that I've missed. Yeah, there's one thing to mention. You might have seen as we've gone through this kind of creating and copying of invoices, there's no mention of VAT. And that is because for most organizations, VAT is disabled. If your organization is VAT registered, then you've set up the VAT module in ExpensePlus. VAT will appear throughout these invoices that we've been creating. And so those fields will display for you. They're just hidden for this example, and also for most organizations, because VAT won't be relevant. Let me just come and have a look at my notes here. Okay, next I'm going to talk you through some of the different screens in ExpensePlus. So inside the invoicing module, we are looking at the outstanding view. And so the outstanding view shows us all of the invoices that have been created that haven't been fully paid. And so this is the default view for this module. And this module interlinks with the bank reconciliation module. If we go to the dashboard, we can see this. We're inside the create invoices, and we can see there's an arrow linking it to the bank reconciliation module. And that's because if we create invoices inside the module, just like you see me doing, they're going to show up inside the bank reconciliation module for the person that's reconciling bank transactions. Now, if they reconcile bank transactions, they're going to disappear from the outstanding view inside the invoicing module. So these modules talk really nicely together. So whether you're the same person that's looking after invoicing and looking after bank reconciliation, or whether in your example organization there's 2 different people, that's okay. These modules work really nicely together, and the outstanding view will always be up to date based on where you're up to with bank reconciliation. You've also got the by customer view. This is where you can essentially create a customer statement. It shows all the different invoices sent to a particular customer. It shows you when they've paid. Inside this view as well, it's a great way to send receipts as well. So if this customer has paid and actually we now need to send them a receipt, we can just click this email receipt button, and that will send a receipt over to the customer. Also, we can click into the invoice if we would like to, and inside here we can download the invoice or download the receipt as well. So the by customer view is really useful in terms of kind of creating a customer statement, but also kind of seeing which invoices they've paid and which invoices are still outstanding. And the all view is really useful if you want to go and check on something. So for example, I might come in here and think, did I send those invoices for the different accommodation that we rent out in August? Well, if I come down here and select the month of August, I can come here and be like, yeah, I did send them. That's okay, I've checked that. And so this is quite a useful thing, a useful screen for checking which invoices have been sent out in which month. You'll also see lots of different ways to filter these, including filtering by customer tag, which again is why I'd recommend you do consider setting up customer tags and tagging customers so that you can filter these different screens by them. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I'm just going to check my notes again. We're going to now move on to talk about reconciliation of invoices. So in this example organization, if we go back to the outstanding view, we can see that we've got a number of invoices that are kind of are waiting to be paid or reconciled, etc. And so we're going to go ahead and go and look at our bank reconciliation screen and see what we can see. We're going to match transactions. It's worth mentioning this is not meant to be an overall tour of how to do bank reconciliation. If you want to find out more about the module we're just about to start talking about, then we offer a training session really similar to this session where you can learn all about this screen, learn about how to reconcile. We're just going to cover a very high level how to go ahead and reconcile invoice payments when they arrive into your bank account or into your Stripe account. So we're going to click on this bank transaction here. This is a bank transaction that has appeared on our bank statement and hasn't been reconciled yet. It looks like invoice income. We can see it's come in from the University of Leeds. We can select this on the left-hand table, and ExpensePlus immediately then goes and finds the invoice that this relates to on the right-hand table. Now, if we want to have a look at that invoice, we can just drill into it by clicking on it, and we can see the invoice exactly the same way as we could have done if we drilled down from the invoicing screen. So we know this is the right invoice. How do we reconcile the money that's come in to the invoice where we click, yep, we're good with that. And that will have immediately removed it from our invoicing screen. ExpensePlus knows that invoice has been paid. The customer doesn't owe us any money. And if we're working on auto accruals, if we're working on an accruals basis, it will also now reflect on our balance sheet that that money has been received into the bank and the customer now no longer owes that money. And so that's what you're going to do for most of your invoice payments. The person reconciling will simply click on the transaction on the left-hand side, and ExpensePlus will go ahead and find the invoice that relates to on the right-hand side. What happens though if the customer either hasn't fully paid the invoice, they've made a part payment, or they've paid multiple invoices in one go, or they've paid before the invoice was actually even kind of theoretically created? In those scenarios, you can't do what I've just done. So in most cases, you can do what I've just done. In 5% of cases, you can't do what I've just done. And so, for example, if I click on this incoming transaction and I try and go and say, yeah, no, it's this one here, you'll notice I don't have a tick button. I can't reconcile these because the amount that has been received doesn't match the amount of the invoice. That, however, is not an issue. I can either click on the left-hand transaction, or I can click this little plus button here, and I can tell ExpensePlus that this is an invoice payment. Now, if this was a payment of multiple invoices, I could then go ahead and select all the different invoices that it relates to. And so that is very possible to do. But in this case, it's a part payment. They've only paid £135 of the £185 they owe us. And so I can switch to part allocation inside here. If I want to, I can search for the customer name. So I can just start searching for Jones, and I can go ahead and I can add in here £135 of the amount that's been paid. So I can allocate this £135 to this £185 invoice, click confirm, and then that's allowed me to match. So it is possible to part allocate. Now, if you work on a receipts and payments basis, what I've just done is a little bit more complicated, because essentially ExpensePlus has reversed out part of the accrual that was created for that invoice. On receipts and payments basis, you can't quite do what I've just done. What you would need to do is go into the invoice and split the allocation at the bottom of the invoice into the different payments that have been received. And then you'll be able to reconcile each one kind of one-to-one. It will allow you to do that. If you don't follow what I've just said, or you want to find out more, if you go to our help guide, which is this blue help icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and then you come into our help guide, you'll be able to look inside here for what to do in terms of reconciling part payments when working on a receipts and payments basis. Okay, so I think that that's all I'm going to mention. So that's how you reconcile income. For most of it, you just tick on the left-hand side and it will reconcile to the right-hand side. If you need to, you can click on the bank transaction on the left-hand side and actually allocate it or part allocate it on that side of the screen. We're going to go back to the invoicing module now, and we are going to talk about credit notes and bad debt. So again, this is only for accruals basis, but basically if you have a customer that hasn't paid you, in this case, we've got Fred Custard, who owes us £15 for this particular invoice. We can see that actually we've emailed Fred Custard multiple times on multiple dates, clearly very unresponsive. There will come a point where the organization will probably decide that it's not possible to collect this invoice income. And at that point, when you decide actually you need to write off this invoice, the way to do that is by clicking this button at the side, which is updating the invoice status, clicking write off bad debt, and then you come in here, you select the date you're going to write off the bad debt. So we're going to select the general fund. You select the category you're going to write it off against. When you write off invoice bad debt, you have to write it off against your own expenditure. And so we're going to click that we do want to write this off, and then we're going to write it off here. It will disappear. It will show as an expense, but it will also show that this income is no longer due in from this customer. Now, you should only do that if you're sure, and if you're not sure, you should go and speak to your independent examiner. If I want to unwrite off that bad debt because maybe I've done it wrong, or maybe because actually that customer finally does pay us tomorrow, and so actually I want to unwrite that off, I can come to the by customer view. I can come and find the invoice. So if I come in here and search for Mr. Fred Custard, I can come here and I can click this update button here, and this will allow me to undo what I've just done. So in the unlikely event that an unresponsive customer finally does pay you having written off an invoice, it is possible to undo that. So that is writing off of bad debt if you ever need to do that. The next scenario is a credit note. And so there are multiple reasons why you might want to issue a credit note. So in this case, we have created a credit note for part of the fees that were paid for our youth group. It doesn't matter what the reason is, we've created a credit note. How do you create a credit note? Well, you come into here and you click create new or copy from existing. Just to save time, I'm going to click on this one that's already been created. So we've created a credit note in here for half the cost of the termly fees. And there must be a reason why we're refunding half the costs of these fees. And so we've got our credit note in here. Now, when we've got our credit note, there's a couple of things we can do. One, we could allocate it against an outstanding invoice that this customer has. That's definitely an option. And so I'll show you how to go ahead and do that. So we've got our credit note in here. We can click this plus button to the right-hand side, and it goes and finds any other invoices for that customer. And in this case, it's found one. It's found their next termly fees for £40. And we can apply the credit note to the invoice, which means the amount owed for the invoice, which is going to be half paid already. And so this is how you allocate a credit note to an invoice. And it's typically what you do, where either the invoice hasn't been paid or there's a future invoice that you can allocate the credit note to. So hopefully this makes sense. We can do this, and that will mean that the credit note has been used up, the invoice amount that's due is lowered, and that's perfect. That is typically what you may want to do. However, you may actually not do that. What you might decide is you want to refund this money to the customer. So this £20, instead of allocating it to another invoice, actually you're going to refund the customer with that. And if you do that, you can go ahead and make the repayment to the customer. And then when you're inside your bank reconciliation module and you come across this outgoing £20 that you've repaid to the customer, you can click on it. You can tell ExpensePlus that you are paying the credit note to the customer. We can come and find the credit note in question. So we can come in here, and again, we can use our search to search for the person's name. So we've got it in here. We can select this credit note in here. We can click confirm, and essentially that is us having used up the credit note because, of course, we've paid it to the customer. And again, the right things have happened on our balance sheet with that. So that's credit notes. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can either allocate them or you can pay them back to the customer. It's up to you. Both will work brilliantly. Finally, then inside the invoicing module, and after this, we're going to move on to the bank reconciliation module. And back inside the invoicing module, there's two other reports I wanted to show you. One is the view payments report. So this allows you to see recent invoice payments. So you can come in here, you can change the dates if you want to. It just shows you all of the kind of recent invoice payments. Where the customer has an email address, it's very easy again to send a kind of email receipts really easily. So we can click on here and we can send this customer an email receipt for the invoice that has been paid. So that's really possible. This is just a really great report if you're wanting to kind of look through and see which invoice has been paid, part paid, credit note allocated against them, that sort of thing. Then do check out this report. The next thing I want to show you was the invoice items report. This is a really useful report that allows you to kind of track the usage of your invoice items. So when we come into this report, it's showing us all of the invoice items that have been used. It automatically does exclude any that haven't been used, which is quite useful because you may have quite a lot of invoice items. But for me, this report is even more useful if you've used this invoice items tag, because at this point I can say, look, I'm only actually interested in room hire. Please only show me invoice items that relate to room hire. And it's showing the 3 rooms that we have in this particular organization that we hire out, and it's showing me the income from in each of these for each of these items for each of the months, so I can track what's happening. I can either do this via amount or I can do it via quantity, and I can look here and see how many hours worth of time in this case, because this is invoiced by hour, have been used by customers in each of these different months. And so this is quite a useful report. It's a new report to ExpensePlus, but it allows you to see the usage of your different invoice items. And we're looking at room hire here. We could also look at the same for weddings, etc. The invoice items tag is a great way, rather than seeing everything, just to create kind of bespoke reports for the different invoice items that you are interested in. So just going to very quickly check my notes again. I think I have covered everything that I needed to cover. So if you do have any questions about invoicing that I haven't covered, now's the time to pop those questions in the Zoom chat, as I'm going to talk you through bank deposits, and then we'll come to our Q&A time in around 5 or 6 minutes time. So bank deposits, then, we are going to go to a completely different module inside ExpensePlus. We're going to go to the bank deposits module here. Just to mention before we do that, that this module also links to our bank reconciliation module. And so again, if you're the person that's recording bank deposits, then the person reconciling the bank transactions will be able to reconcile the bank deposits you've recorded when they come to do bank reconciliation. When I come to this module, the first thing I want to explain is what this module isn't. This is not how you record all of your income into ExpensePlus. You'd literally be wasting your time if you had a bank statement in front of you now and you were sitting there trying to enter all of the income through this module. This module is clear. This is not what this module is for. This module is for cash and checks. So we're going to click on a bank deposit that's been started. You can create a bank deposit using this option here, but I'm going to click on one that's already been started just to save us a bit of time. And so at the top of the screen, it very clearly says cash and checks only. What this is trying to do is it's trying to replace the paper-based form that when you go to the bank and you're kind of counting the cash and the checks that you're about to take to the bank, rather than recording all of that on paper and then the person that's creating your accounts when they come to do bank reconciliation keying all of that data in off the paper, the whole point of this screen is that actually the data can get captured electronically to begin with. So we can see at the top of this, we get to record details of the bank deposit, into which account it was deposited, who counted it, who deposited it, etc. And so we can record that at the top. And if we want to, we can attach a file as well in here. So we can attach a file with it. Maybe we've got a form with some signatures on it or something else we want to attach. We can do that here. And so that's a really good option. Then for the money that we're about to take to the bank, or in this case, it was taken to the bank, we get to record the different income that includes. And this is where I want to explain the different income types in ExpensePlus. So ExpensePlus has gift aid built in, and therefore it does care about the difference between Paul Jennings giving us a donation and Paul Jennings paying for something, maybe even hiring our building and getting an invoice. It does care about the difference because one of them's gift aidable, one of them potentially gift aidable, one of them's definitely not. And so in the name donation section here should get recorded any cash or checks where the donor's name is known. We're seeing the donor name and their donor reference number. It's possible per user to hide the donor name. So it's just the donor reference number that's seen. So the person counting the offerings for your organization actually may not actually be able to see the names. You might just get the ability to see the reference number. And we get to record which fund and category this income relates to. We get to record the donation method and the amount here. Now, this should get recorded in this section regardless of whether the donor has a valid gift aid declaration. The gift aid module inside ExpensePlus will determine ultimately whether or not the donation is gift aidable based on whether the donor has gift aid form. So don't try and include or disclude people from this section based on gift aid. You should put all named donations in this section, and ExpensePlus will decide whether or not they're eligible or not for gift aid. In a similar way, it is actually possible to claim GADs, which stands for Gift Aid Small Donations, on named donations as long as they're via cash and as long as the donor doesn't have a valid gift aid declaration. Again, the gift aid module inside ExpensePlus is clever enough to know how to do this. So still record named donations in the named donation section, and ExpensePlus will do what it needs to do in terms of gift aid for you. And if you're not sure how that works, again, we offer a training session all about the gift aid module and donor management inside ExpensePlus. The GAD section down here is for any gift aid small donations where they are unnamed. So this might be loose cash in an offering bowl or basket or box where you don't know who the cash is from. This gets recorded in this GAD section here, and ExpensePlus will automatically include it in GADS claims that get created for your organization. If you're not sure what GADS is, then if you click the eye icon to the right-hand side of here, there's a blog which talks you through all about GADS and what it is and how it's used. The next section, the third income type in ExpensePlus is invoice payment. Now, if you've bothered to create someone an invoice, when they pay you, it's fairly important that you allocate that income against that money coming in against the invoice. Otherwise, forevermore, that invoice is going to sit on your balance sheet and show as outstanding. And you're going to be thinking you're waiting for money from that person or customer, and actually they've paid you. So the third income type is invoice payments, where you go ahead and you can allocate it against the different invoices. You can part allocate it if needed as well. And then the fourth option in here is other income. All other income should go in other income. And so anything going as other income is definitely going to go nowhere near gift aid. ExpensePlus looks at this and goes, well, it's other income. It's not a donation. I'm not going to include you in the donation reports inside ExpensePlus. And there's no way that that's ever going to land anywhere near your gift aid inside ExpensePlus. So 4 different income types. So we've got mentioned name donations, we've got GADS donations, we've got invoice payments, and then everything else goes in other income. Now, when we have collected this money, if before putting it in the bank, we take some money out of it, maybe there's someone that's owed some expenses and we decide we want to kind of shortcut a little bit and take £5 out of this money to give to the person that maybe has bought some milk or something, then we can add expenses in here. ExpensePlus will then ask for the receipt inside the receipts module, because of course all expenditures should be properly accounted for, no matter kind of how it's paid for. And in this case, if it's paid out of money that's been collected, then you need to record it in here and you need to provide a receipt. And then finally, again, before taking this money to the bank, you might, for example, decide that you want to retain some of this money for your petty cash. So maybe you've got petty cash tins, one of them's running quite low. And so rather than paying all of this money into the bank, you want to take £50 out to add to one of your petty cash tins. If you do that, you come in here and you tell ExpensePlus which petty cash tin you're doing it for. And you can tell it, look, I removed £50, and that's why the total's lower. And this will update your petty cash account to show that. And then conversely, you can do the opposite, where you can actually add cash. Your petty cash tin might have too much money into it. And so rather than just banking £105.10p, you want to take £50 out of your petty cash tin. And so again, you can do that inside here, which will obviously update the amount that you're taking to the bank and update the petty cash tin as well. So this is bank deposits. I'm not going to do any of those things. Hopefully that makes sense as I've talked through how you record bank deposits. If you have the same donors that kind of give each week or each month that you do this, there is a copy from previous, which just allows you to kind of essentially bulk add donors that give frequently by cash or check inside that section. But we're going to click cancel to that. And now I'm going to show you the other half of this. So this is a bank deposit that has been recorded. We're now going to look at how we reconcile this bank deposit. And so we're going to come back to match transactions. And how do you reconcile a bank deposit? Well, really straightforward. You click on the left-hand table when the money appears in your bank, and then it will automatically, just like it did for invoicing, go ahead and find the bank deposit. Again, if we want to have a look at this bank deposit on the right-hand table, we can. It takes us straight back to where we were before. But essentially, reconciling bank deposits is super straightforward. And the point of recording them up front is just that you don't have to go and dig out the form that was filled in when you took the money to the bank and try and enter it all into ExpensePlus. Actually, you've already done it. And so reconciling this is literally a click of a button. So hopefully that makes sense. That's bank deposits in a nutshell. If you haven't